I'm Dan Thomas, and this is the Coastal Rainbow Forum, bringing you topics of interest from the Manatee and Sarasota, LGBTQ plus, and progressive communities. This week we have Steve Ryan. Steve is coming back again this week to talk about the Trillion Trees planting project going on around the world and the impact of uh, global climate change. So, thanks for coming back, Steve.
Great to be back, Dan. I thank you for having me back and on this important topic.
Yeah, it certainly is a very important topic.
Well, I want to start out today talking a little bit about, again, reminding people that we have symbiosis on this planet. That's the basic thing. The oxygen that we breathe comes from the plant world, and the animal world cannot survive without oxygen. The oxygen content on the Earth has remained virtually stable for some time now, but it has been much higher at other points in our history. And so as the carbon has been higher too in percentage at various times. Those of us who believe in science know at various points in the U.S. in the globe's history, we have had virtually a tropical planet heated up, and also we have had snowball Earth, where the Earth was completely covered with snow and ice, even to the equators, where they believe that the ocean was frozen to a depth as much as 12 or 15 meters. And but some small life did survive, and thankfully and that's why we're here now, because life did survive. But I want to go over here and talk about some of the things that are really endangering us, still endangering us, and then I hope if you'll notify me about 5 minutes before the end, if we don't get there, I want to talk about the trillion trees, because that's the part of the solution. But the solution cannot happen unless we stop doing some of the things that's causing the problem. And that's where we're at right now, and what's causing part of the problem. What country in the world, would you want to make a guess? This is pretty well known. That's called the world's lungs.
Jeez, the world's lungs?
Yes.
Is that what you said? I have no idea. What country would that be?
That's Brazil, and that's the Amazon, and that's called the world's lungs.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because they had this huge rainforest that we're losing at a record pace. And what happened there? There have been encroachments going on for years and years there into the rainforest, and harvesting their exotic woods and things like this, and tearing down and increasing agricultural land in places where it's not meant to be agricultural land, and uprooting as you know, they've had some very bad encounters with the native populations. As what history does this remind us of? Taking over native lands, and from the global satellite views, it's incredible if you look down and see the lands, and where their lands are supposed to be, you'll see a forest and jungle, and then you'll see the edges of it completely misshaped and everything by the encroachments, and where they have went across the boundary lines into the areas, and that's the tribes that have lived there for hundreds, if not thousands, of years as native lands, and they're being encroached on, and their wood is being stolen, their hunting grounds are being destroyed, and they were promised these lands if they would stay in those borders, and yet people without the right to be there are doing it, and they're getting away with it. And since other countries in the world are facing the same thing the United States is facing as part of a global problem in the rise of some right-wing governments that have done terrible things to their people, and Brazil is no exception. As you may know, the Bolsonaro took over there a while back, and so what's happened? I'm going to read some stats here to you. And this article is from the New York Times. I'm sorry. Okay, but anyway, enforcement actions by Brazil's main environmental agency fell by 20% during the first 6 months of 2019 compared with the same period in 2018. Fines, warnings, and the elimination of illegal equipment from preservation zones are among the measures Brazil's authorities are doing less often. The drop means that the vast stretches of the rainforest can be torn down with less resistance from the nation's authorities. The result has been a loss of 1,330 square miles of rainforest just since January of 2019, a loss rate that is 40% higher than a year previous, according to Brazilian government records. And incidentally,
Wow.
the person who oversaw these records and everything you may have heard about, there was a huge scandal. He was literally forced out of his position because, again, when you have dictatorial governments that don't like the stats coming out, what do? They go after the people that bring the stats out. What country does that sound like it's happened in before? Does it remind you from last week, my article last week? The United States and the ES, or whatever that group was. I can't remember the initials right now. But anyway, that's another situation. But I will read it for the article here. When 8 former environment ministers protested in May, current environmental minister Ricardo Salles alleged there is permanent and well-orchestrated defamation campaign by non-governmental organizations and supposed experts within and outside of Brazil. It is easily deniable Mr. Brazero's brand right-wing celebrity closely resembles that. Okay, sorry, carry going here. Anyway, it's saying that Brazero closely resembles that of President Trump, and it's telling about all the things they're doing. Global warming is going to increase, and Brazil is one of the countries which has all kinds of arable land that they could plant more trees in. It's one of the countries that has been listed by the study that was done for the trillion trees. But the problem is the cutting is going on so much faster than any planting is going on that is staggering. This is the oxygen that we breathe being destroyed on the planet, on and on and on. So, another example of what this is doing. Where do you think? Let's take a quick geography test here. Where is the number one and number two sources of ice on the world? Number one, Dan, is the Antarctica. Number two is the Greenland ice impact up there. An incredible amount of ice. Recently, this summer, the ice situation in Greenland has went off the rails because they had an unusually warm spell, again caused by global warming, and they had a 56.5% increase this year in melt. 56.5% increase in the melt rate in Greenland. Think what this is going to do, and think of what's going to happen here. This came from the Danish Meteorological Institute, and they were extremely alarmed over what was going on there. Absolutely incredible situation, and putting us in a place where we may not be able to recover with this kind of loss. Greenland, if they continue at this rate, well, anyway, they have here locally. I'm speaking local because we probably have listeners of other places, but locally, what do you think, Dan? The loss has been. How much sea increase in the last 70 years do you think has been here in the Minnesota area? You want to make a guess how much the sea has risen around here in the last 70 years?
I don't know. I would guess maybe 6 inches.
You're very close. 8 inches.
Wow.
At least 8 inches. They think at the current rate that we will have a 2 to 3 foot, by the most conservative estimates, a 2 to 3 foot increase by, from that point to 2100. And this is going to cause problems. They're already addressing this in long-term planning, insurance planning in other parts of the state of Florida. So, but the point being, if we would lose, if we would lose all of the Greenland's ice sheet, uh, they're saying that the sea level rise would be 7.2 meters, or 23 feet and 7 inches,
Wow.
and that is, and they're saying that it's possible in the next couple of hundred years. That would put a lot of Florida's coastal areas and other parts of the world underwater, and that's only from Greenland. That's not including the absolutely even worse disaster that's going on in Antarctica. That only includes Greenland, not Antarctica as well. Of course, these figures are actually staggering. Um, in Russia, meanwhile, the forest fires have they've covered 30,000 square kilometers, or 11,500 square miles of territory. 11,500 square miles have been burnt by the forest fires that have been going out of control. In fact, they even brought in the military trying to control these. It's just staggering what's going on. And of course, these are pumping more and more, the forest fires, carbon into the air. And again, the ice sheets melt, more land's exposed, and less reflectivity and more heating of the earth.
Right.
It's a runaway freight train. And what we have another situation, I'm not going to go into it here because I don't have time to go into the science behind it, but there is the chlorates that are under the sea that are frozen, and with the sea level increases in temperature, which are going to occur and are occurring, if those melt, we are beyond the point of no return, because it will release those extremely absorbent gases into the atmosphere, which in turn will put even a further runaway freight train even faster in causing the global climate change. People say, well, I can't believe we ever had Snowball Earth. Well, yes, we did, not once but twice.
Right.
And Snowball Earth, the last one we had, what brought the Earth out of it was, of course, the volcanic eruptions, they believe, that happened because of all the pressure on the Earth, all this ice pressing down on the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then the volcanic eruptions happened, and the black volcanic ash came out and started reheating the Earth. But the point being here, if we don't do something about this, we're going to have more and more problems in the future. Some of the ice will refreeze. Incidentally, people say, "Well, it's not just going to be winter again; it'll freeze." No, not all will refreeze though, because each year less and less of it will refreeze. And on a personal note in that area, when I used to live in the Middle East, we used to fly over we used to do the polar route often to fly over. And I remember we'd look down, we never saw Greenland. And I think I mentioned this in another interview I had, that I think it was just a couple of years ago, and I was in Europe the last time, we flew back and the pilot said, please look down. If people are interested in seeing Greenland, you can now see Greenland, if those of you who have never seen it. And we looked down, and sure enough, the ice fields are way depleted, and you can actually see the bare land and the ground sticking out. Of course, this was in June. We flew back over to the United States, and unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. But I remember thinking before we'd never see Greenland, but now we do. So people talk about the average global temperature increasing by a little more than 1 degree. That's not a large amount to notice if you're sitting in Hamburg or London, but that's a global average, and it's much greater in the polar regions. And that's
right.
where a lot of this is happening. The polar regions are being worst affected right now. I want to give one more article here before I try to go in. I don't run out of time here. This is very important. This is from a study from the UN, and this is from, again, one of the major newspapers, and who carried it from